All right, after a very long wait, I finally finished up some of the last layers of my Mass Disappearances Iceberg. If you aren't already aware, as the name suggests, mass disappearances are situations where large groups of people all go missing all at the same time. If you haven't seen the first two parts of this series, that's okay, because this video, the bottom of the Mass Disappearances Iceberg, has some of the strangest and most obscure stories from this entire iceberg. To recap, these iceberg videos usually start at the top of the chart, where we cover kind of the more tame and well-known stories on whatever particular topic we're covering, and as we dive deeper, we get into more obscure and disturbing entries. Since we're now at the very bottom of this chart, we're going to be discussing some of the strangest and most perplexing mass disappearance cases in all of history, and I guarantee you probably haven't heard of most of these. With this in mind, get ready for one of the most unsettling and mysterious videos I have ever released on the channel. As always, grab a snack, get comfortable, and shut the blinds. The disappearances of Eve Ho, Kevin Lim, Jackie Lee, and Philip Sitt. Our first case begins in Toronto, Canada, on September 24th, 2005, a date which, for the families of 4 Canadian teenagers, would be shrouded in mystery for over 2 decades. In the morning hours of that day, 17-year-old high schooler Philip Sitt tells his parents that he's going out to meet with some friends, and never returns. The following day, he is reported missing, and shortly thereafter, a search is conducted. Locations he was known to have frequented, such as Toronto's Kensington Market, the Eaton Centre Shopping Mall, Markham's Pacific Mall, and Metro Square, are all noted, but he would never be spotted at any of them. Unfortunately, the initial search reveals little to no information about the boy's whereabouts. Sitt's family and friends endure nearly a year of uncertainty regarding his fate. On the 9th of August 2006, a grim discovery was made in King Township, a small town just outside Toronto. Near the intersection of King and Weston Roads, the skeletal remains of Philip Sitt's body were found by a resident on their rural property, approximately 50 kilometers from his home in Scarborough, Toronto. Only adding to the horror for Philip's family and friends, the little evidence uncovered at the scene seemed to indicate that the cause of Philip's death had been a homicide. Many of the specific details of the case are still being kept under wraps by authorities to this day, and as such, we don't know how exactly he might have been killed. In the immediate aftermath of the discovery, the police only revealed specific details to those close to Philip, choosing to wait until later in the month when the investigation had made further progress to go public. Here's where things start to get complicated. 5 days after the discovery of the remains, 3 more teenagers went missing from the area. 17-year-old Eve Ho, her 18-year-old boyfriend Jackie Lee, and their 18-year-old friend Kevin Lim all went missing on the 14th of August, 2006. These were not just 3 random teenagers either. They all went to Harvard Collegiate Institute, which their friend Philip Sitt also attended. The circumstances of their disappearance are as puzzling as they are concerning. The 3 teenagers seemed to vanish into thin air, leaving their personal belongings, including their cell phones. This detail is particularly intriguing, as it suggests a deliberate attempt to avoid being tracked or contacted. That is, assuming the 3 of them left of their own accord. On the 14th, Kevin Lim asked his grandmother to leave the door unlocked while he ran down to the corner store to go grab a drink. But he never came back home and hasn't been seen since. Jackie phoned his mother earlier that day, but when she returned home from work, he wasn't there. Eve, who was Jackie's girlfriend, made plans to meet another one of her friends at the mall, but never showed up. "11 days after the disappearances of these three, the discovery of Philip Sitt's remains are released to the public. So, one way or another, it appears very likely that the disappearances of Philip and the other three teenagers have to be connected in some way. One prevailing hypothesis is that Eve, Jackie, and Kevin were somehow involved in Philip Sitt's murder. The timing of their disappearance, just days after Philip's body was discovered, seems very suspicious. Is it possible that they were involved in his death, found out details of the investigation before they were revealed to the public, and decided to flee the area before they could be prosecuted? Is it possible that they were Philip's killers, or at the very least, that he died accidentally in their presence, and maybe they decided to dump his body? He did state that he was leaving to go visit some friends on the night he disappeared in 2005. Another theory suggests that the three teenagers might have been victims themselves, perhaps going into hiding to protect themselves from a dangerous individual or group. Or, more grimly, that they were taken out to prevent them from disclosing their involvement in Philip's death. However, even with the indication that the three might have somehow been involved with the murder, no evidence whatsoever has been found linking them to the killing. If they really did go into hiding to avoid being arrested, wouldn't they only have done so if they knew without a shred of a doubt that there would be irrefutable evidence found linking them to the case? They likely would have tried to keep tabs on the case too if they did run away for this reason. So why wouldn't they have come back by now after seeing that they aren't suspects? Like most teenagers, these three were known to be glued to their phones, yet each of them either left them at home or haven't placed any calls or texts since their disappearance. Their bank accounts have also remained untouched. The strangest part about this case is obviously the manner in which the last three friends went missing. It's almost like they just vanished into thin air at random. There doesn't seem to really have been any planning involved. They never left any letters or any indications to their families or friends of where they might have been going, and none of them really took any of their personal belongings with them. It seems relatively clear that the disappearances of Jackie, Eve, and Kevin were somehow related to the disappearance and murder of Philip, but exactly how is unclear. It's unlikely that they left the country through traditional means, as two of them didn't have their passports in their possession, and one of them didn't have a passport at all. The investigation into these disappearances has been ongoing for years, but new leads are far and few between. Despite extensive searches and public appeals for information, no trace of Eve Ho, Jackie Lee, or Kevin Lim has ever been found since their 2006 disappearances. Their families continue to live in a state of limbo, hoping for answers, but fearing the worst. Tom and Eileen Lonergan. Thomas and Eileen Lonergan were a married couple from America, both of whom were described as adventurous, selfless, and caring, and had previously served with the United States Peace Corps in Tuvalu and Fiji. Tom and Eileen were both in love with scuba diving and enjoyed the freedom they felt floating through the clear blue water, taking in the plant life and fish around them. Before leaving Oceania and returning back to their home in America after their 2-year-long excursion with the Peace Corps, they decided they wanted to celebrate and do something fun to reward themselves. 1998 would also be their 10th wedding anniversary, giving them another good excuse to treat themselves. The group flew west to Australia, where they decided to attend a group scuba diving excursion with the Outer Edge Diving Company to St. Crispin's Reef, part of the Great Barrier Reef, on the 25th of January, 1998. They both placed giddy phone calls to their families where they discussed how excited they were to finally see the reef for themselves. After all 26 passengers, including the Lonergans, boarded the ship, the MV Outer Edge, they departed from Port Douglas in Queensland, Australia. From there, they traveled around 60 kilometers or 37 miles off the coast and into the ocean to reach the dive site in the Coral Sea. They would have 3 separate dives throughout the day. Tom and Eileen, both having experience with diving, quickly moved ahead of the group, using sign language to communicate beneath the waves, expressing their excitement about the wildlife. Things seemed to be going well through the first, second, and third dives. And upon wrapping up for the day, the captain claims that he ordered a crew member to conduct a head count. Apparently, while this was happening, a couple jumped into the water, confusing the crew member who was counting. The crew would come to the conclusion that everyone had returned aboard the ship and headed back to shore, where they continued to take new groups of divers out to explore the reef. However, 2 days later, a discovery was made aboard the MV Outer Edge. 2 packs of gear and 2 bags with the name tags Lonergan had been left on the boat. After checking their records, the crew realized that the bags belonged to Tom and Eileen, who they had taken out to dive at sea 2 days prior on the 25th. They placed calls to the couple with the contact information they had provided upon signing up, but nobody answered. It was at this point that the crew realized what they had done. They had abandoned the couple at sea. Without food or water, and considering the dangers of predators and exhaustion alongside how much time had already passed, the situation was immediately extremely dire. Within minutes, the crew contacted the authorities and the Coast Guard, explaining the situation. A search party was quickly dispatched via sea and air 25 miles out into the Coral Sea, searching for any sign of Tom and Eileen. Now, one piece of critical equipment for diving is the buoyancy compensator. It's used to maintain neutral buoyancy while underwater to keep divers at their desired depth without having to exhaust themselves by doing so manually. It can also be used to establish positive buoyancy while at the surface and functions as a life jacket. It's filled with gas from the oxygen tank, but can typically also be inflated by the user's breath. Because of this, Tom and Eileen were likely able to remain at the surface without quickly succumbing to exhaustion from treading water. This seemingly should have bought them a significant amount of time. Still, without fresh water and food, they wouldn't have had much to spare if they were still alive. "24 hours a day, the team searched the waves. By the end of the third day, though, they threw in the towel. Not a single speck of evidence could be found, other than a set of dive weights, which were discovered at the bottom of the ocean several days prior, ironically by a later diving excursion from Outer Edge, who deemed them a bonus find. Later, these weights would be confirmed to have belonged to the missing couple. Very quickly, the Outer Edge Diving Company came under fire from the public and from the families of the 2 victims, who rightfully pointed the finger at them for failing to conduct an accurate head count and to follow safety protocols, which should have easily ensured that such a horrific tragedy could never occur. The diving company, astonishingly, actually fired back, claiming that the couple had stated they were both experienced divers and that they were going to go off on their own for the last dive. The following month, in February, a woman's wetsuit matching Eileen's size washed ashore in North Queensland, Australia at Port Douglas Beach. They were able to date the approximate amount of time that the suit had been in the ocean by analyzing the barnacle growth, and determined that it had likely been submerged since January. Nearby, they also discovered 2 inflatable dive jackets with Tom and Eileen's names written on them, as well as fins and their compressed air tanks. However, the most disturbing discovery was a damaged diver's slate, a device which allows the user to write messages and communicate underwater. Written on it was the following message. Monday, January 26th, 1998, 8 a.m. To anyone who can help us, we have been abandoned on Agincourt Reef by MV Outer Edge on the 25th of January, 1998, 3 p.m. Please help to rescue us before we die. Help. During the subsequent investigation, the authorities analyzed the recovered equipment and inferred that the 2 likely had not been attacked by sharks or other sea predators, and instead had spiraled into delirium as a result from their perilous situation, dehydration, and exhaustion. The evidence suggested that they then voluntarily removed their diving gear. Without the assistance of the buoyancy compensator, it would have only been a matter of time before the 2 drowned and sank to the bottom of the ocean, finding their final resting place among the coral they were so eager to explore. The bodies of the 2 divers were never recovered, but the aforementioned line of events is generally accepted as the most likely scenario. However, numerous other theories would continue to sprout around the case. After the disappearances, numerous pages from the couple's diaries were leaked to the public. In one entry, Tom wrote, "Like a student who has finished an exam, I feel that my life is complete, and I am ready to die." In a similar entry written by Eileen, she writes, "Tom's not suicidal, but he's got a death wish that could lead him to what he desires, and I could get caught in that. He hopes to die a quick and painless death, and he hopes it happens soon." The entries would continue on, describing lives which seemingly contradicted the image the married couple portrayed to the outside world. Apparently, the 2 were deeply unhappy with their lives, despite the charitable work they had done and the adventures they had been on together. Because of these entries, some have speculated that Tom and Eileen purposefully never returned to the boat and simply ended their own lives on their own terms. I personally don't find this very likely, as a death by drowning is pretty commonly known to be one of the slowest and most excruciating ways to go. This directly contradicts with what Eileen wrote about Tom desiring a quick and painless death. The captain of the dive boat, Jack Nern, was eventually charged with their unlawful killing, but was eventually found not guilty. The Outer Edge Dive Company, however, pleaded guilty to negligence and received a fine, which, in my opinion, is a pretty light punishment given the circumstances. The West Mesa Murders. Our next case begins 3 years after the disappearance of Tom and Eileen in 2001, and approximately 8,000 miles across the Pacific Ocean in the desert city of Albuquerque, New Mexico. Here, 11 women and an unborn child from impoverished, vulnerable communities would slowly disappear from the streets, their fates unknown for years. It's likely that 24-year-old Doreen Marquez vanished in 2003. Veronica Ramiro, who was last seen at Wyoming Boulevard and Central Ave in Albuquerque, disappeared around February of 2004. Soon after followed 15-year-old Silania Edwards, an endangered runaway from Lawton, Oklahoma. She was last seen in May of 2004 with 3 sex workers in Aurora, Colorado. Later into 2004, another 15-year-old Jamie Barella and her cousin Evelyn Salazar, 27, disappeared in April after leaving a family gathering to go to a park. Julie Nieto, age 24, Cinnamon Elks, age 32, Monica Candelaria, age 22, and Michelle Valdez, also 22, who was 4 months pregnant at the time, also disappeared sometime between 2004 and 2005. Likely one of the last disappearances was Victoria Chavez, age 26. All 11 of these disappearances remained as isolated cases for many years. Before we get to how they were all connected, however, we need to establish some important consistencies. First, obviously, each of the missing were women. Second, as stated previously, each of these women came from impoverished communities. However, upon closer examination of these women, it goes a bit deeper than that. The disappearances did not immediately raise alarms of a potential serial killer or mass abduction. Many of the women were involved in sex work or struggled with substance abuse, factors that often lead to less immediate and thorough investigations. The transient nature of their lifestyles made it difficult for law enforcement to pinpoint exact times and circumstances of their disappearances. Friends and family members reported them missing, but the cases remained largely disconnected in the eyes of the authorities. Rumors did eventually begin to circulate about a potential predator or killer who targeted vulnerable women, but without any specific evidence, nothing could be proven. Eventually, years passed for each of the 11 victims, and hope of finding any of them alive began to diminish. That is, until the 2nd of February, 2009. That night, a woman named Christine Ross would take her dog, Ruka, for a walk along a dried-out wash in Albuquerque's West Mesa. At some point during the walk, Ruka found a bone resembling a human femur. After contacting the police, authorities drove out to the desert site where the bone was discovered and began excavating the area. This location would eventually host one of the largest crime scene investigations in the city's history. Over the following several weeks, investigators unearthed the remains of each of the 11 missing women, along with an unborn fetus, each of whom would only be identified after a grueling year-long process involving DNA testing and dental record examination. After examining satellite photographs taken of the West Mesa area between 2003 and 2005, tire tracks and patches of disturbed soil could be seen in the area where the grave was discovered. According to these photos, the last victim was buried at the site in 2005, and by 2006, the area had been plotted and prepared for residential housing development, with the workers blissfully unaware of what lay beneath their feet. Once each of the victims were identified and the consistencies between each of them became clear, it was obvious that some unknown person or group had specifically sought out these vulnerable women in particular and murdered each of them. These were not just names on a missing persons list. They were daughters, sisters, mothers, and friends. Their disappearances, once isolated incidents, were now clearly part of a larger, more sinister pattern. This case would eventually become known as the West Mesa murders, and the unknown killer as the West Mesa bone collector. Now, exactly how each of these women were taken and killed wasn't, and really still isn't, exactly apparent. Some suspect that it was a single person who would lure these women into a private location before killing them and dumping their bodies in the West Mesa. However, it's also possible that these women found themselves as victims in a sex trafficking ring, and that they were killed by a much larger, more complex organization. Over the years, several suspects have attracted police attention, though none have been officially named. Lorenzo Montoya, who lived less than 3 miles from the burial site, was considered a person of interest. He had a history of violence against sex workers and had reportedly talked about killing women and burying them on the West Mesa. In 2006, Montoya strangled a teenage sex worker to death at his trailer before being shot dead by the teen's boyfriend. His home was also searched by detectives, where they discovered a video of the man having intercourse with a woman before the video transitioned to show a wall and a bed. It's at this point in the video that you can hear what sounds like Montoya pulling duct tape from a roll and opening a trash bag before saying the word tranquilo, the Spanish equivalent of quiet or calm down. Only part of the full video was released to the public. Interestingly, after his death in 2006, it appears that the killings stopped. Another figure of interest was Joseph Blee, dubbed the mid-school rapist for his activities in the 1980s. In 2014, police became interested in Blee as a potential suspect for the West Mesa murders. Evidence potentially linking him to the crimes included a tree tag from a nursery he frequented found at the burial site, and a collection of women's underwear and jewelry not belonging to his wife or daughter found in his home. In 2015, local authorities suspected him as the killer in a sex worker homicide. After testing the inner waistband and belt of the sex worker found dead on Central Ave in Albuquerque, police discovered a DNA sample, and it was matched to Joseph. Blee, who is currently serving a 36-year sentence for the mid-school rape case, has denied any involvement in the West Mesa murders. As of 2024, the case remains unsolved, and we still have no idea who murdered these women and buried them in the desert. Several years ago, the city erected West Mesa Memorial Park in tribute to the girls in the location where they were found in Albuquerque's West Mesa. A $100,000 reward is still being offered by Albuquerque Crime Stoppers for any information which leads to the conviction of the perpetrator. The Fort Worth Missing Trio. We now go 2 days before Christmas 1974 to the city of Fort Worth, Texas. There, at the time, lived 3 girls. Mary Rachel Trolica, age 17, who went by her middle name of Rachel. Lisa Renee Wilson, age 14, who also went by her middle name Renee. And finally, the youngest of the 3, Julie Ann Mosley, at the age of just 9 years old. On the morning of December 23rd, 1974, just before noon, Rachel, who had recently married, invited Renee to come along with her to go Christmas shopping at several different stores in the area. Renee, excited about the holiday season, agreed, but insisted on returning home by 4:00 p.m. to attend a Christmas party with her boyfriend, who had given her a promise ring that morning. Just before they departed, 9-year-old Julie asked if she could tag along, stating that she didn't want to spend the day alone. The 2 older girls told her she needed to ask her parents and get permission before they would let her come. She ran inside and asked her mother if she could go. The following is a statement from her mother, Rayanne Mosley. "I was working for an electrical contractor, and my husband and I were separated. It was a bitter, bitter time. I remember that Julie called and wanted to go to Seminary South. I said, 'No, you don't have any money. You just stay home.' I knew Renee and her mother, but I really didn't know Rachel. But Julie, kept whining about how she wouldn't have anyone to play with. I finally gave in, but told her to be home by 6. The trio set off in Rachel's 1972 Oldsmobile 98, first stopping at an Army-Navy surplus store to purchase jeans before heading to the Seminary South Shopping Center, now known as La Grand Plaza de Fort Worth. The bustling mall was filled with last-minute shoppers, creating a festive yet chaotic atmosphere. By 4:00 p.m., the girls had not returned home, concerning each of their families. When 6:00 rolled around, their loved ones became frightened and decided to search the mall themselves. They discovered Rachel's car parked in the Sears parking lot, locked with a single Christmas present inside. There were no signs of the girls, and mall security reported no suspicious activity or encounters with the trio. The family remained at the mall throughout the night, waiting for their daughters to return, but they never did. Soon after, the police were called before the case was given to the Fort Worth Police Department's Missing Persons Bureau. On the 24th of December, 1974, the very next day, a letter arrived at the Trelica home, purportedly written by Rachel. The letter, postmarked the same day, stated that the girls had gone to Houston and would return in a week. I know I'm going to catch it, but we had to get away. We're going to Houston. See you in about a week. The car is in Sears' upper lot. Love, Rachel. The handwriting was analyzed, but experts could not conclusively determine its authenticity. The letter added a layer of complexity to the case, leading some to speculate that the girls had run away. The letter contained several other important clues as to where the girls may have gone, and if they had left of their own accord. First, it was addressed to Thomas A. Trelica instead of Tommy, as Rachel usually called him. Next, Rachel's name, written in the top left corner of the envelope, appeared to have been initially misspelled, as the L in her name seemed to have accidentally been written as an E. The postmark did not contain a city, only a blurred zip code that appeared to be 76083. With the number 3 potentially being inverted horizontally. It's also possible that this character was an 8. Upon cross-referencing the postmark with existing zip codes, it's likely to either be 76038, being from Eliasville, Texas, or 76088 and was sent from Weatherford, Texas. Either way, each of the families strongly disagreed with the idea that the girls had ran away. 9-year-old Julie's mother had this to say. I could have told you that night that they didn't run away. Renee wanted to go to that party, and no 9-year-old is going to run off 2 days before Christmas. Everybody knows that. Rachel's mother, Frances Langston, also publicly chimed in on the matter. A lot of people may think they left with someone they knew, but I'll always think, until the day I die, that the girls were taken. Following the initial report, the Fort Worth Police Department launched an extensive search, interviewing mall employees, shoppers, and anyone who might have seen the girls. Despite their efforts, no substantial leads emerged. Other potential sightings of the girls at the mall that day may contain insight as to what happened. One man in 1981 claimed that he had seen a man forcing a girl into a van in the parking lot on the day of the disappearance. The man reportedly informed him that it was a family dispute and to stay out of the struggle. A store clerk also stated during the initial investigation that a woman informed her that she had seen the 3 girls at the mall on the 23rd. Apparently, she had seen them being forced into a yellow pickup truck near Buddy's grocery store, located in the mall. The only other information given about this truck was that it had lights on top of it. However, this woman was never tracked down by the authorities, and her testimony couldn't be verified or elaborated upon. These 2 potential sightings do paint similar pictures, and may have been referencing the same scene, but without any further information, they offer little fuel to the investigation. The busy, chaotic scene at the mall just days before Christmas meant it would have been extremely easy for people to blend into a crowd, even if suspicious activity was taking place. This likely led to very few actual sightings of the girls being reported. The girls were never located, and very few, if any, substantial leads have been made in the 50 years since this case began. At this point, with most of their parents having passed away, and with pretty much no progress being made on this case since the girls vanished that September day, it's very difficult to see how we will ever reach a conclusion to this tragic story. The Clinton Avenue 5. On the sweltering day of August 20th, 1978, the streets of Newark, New Jersey buzzed with the typical sounds of summer. Children's laughter echoed from nearby parks, and the rhythmic bounce of basketballs on concrete courts filled the air. For 5 teenage boys, Melvin Pittman, Ernest Taylor, Alvin Turner, Randy Johnson, and Michael McDowell, it was just another day in their young lives. Little did they know that by nightfall, their names would be etched into one of the most baffling mysteries in New Jersey's history. The boys, each aged between 16 and 17, had spent the afternoon playing basketball, their bodies glistening with sweat underneath the unforgiving sun. As evening approached, they gathered on Clinton Avenue, eager to earn some pocket money. A local contractor named Lee Evans had offered them work, a chance to make a few dollars moving boxes. It seemed like an innocent opportunity, a way to end their summer day on a productive note. Evans arrived in his pickup truck, the boys piling in with the energy and enthusiasm only teenagers possess. Among them was a 6th boy, Roderick Royster, whose father's sudden intervention would later prove to have been a miracle. As the truck prepared to pull out, Royster's father appeared, ordering his son off the vehicle. It was a moment of parental authority that, as we'll find out soon, would haunt the man for decades to come. As the truck rumbled away, carrying the 5 remaining boys into the gathering dusk, no one could have imagined the chilling turn of events that was about to unfold. The following account comes from Michael McDowell's sister, Terry Lawson, who was 11 at the time. She recalls watching Evans pick up her brother. When Michael came out, I found it strange that he didn't get in from the passenger side. Evans got out, and Michael went in from the driver's side, and he sat in the middle seat. When they drove off, I clearly remember the back of his head, and you could see Michael and Evans' head right next to him. I watched that truck drive down Main Street. That's the last time I saw him. When the boys failed to return home that night, the families started to become concerned. One of the first people who was questioned, obviously, was Lee Evans. Floria McDonald, the mother of Alvin Turner, later stated upon confronting him about her son that Evans was, quote, kind of smart and nasty with her. She hadn't been aware that he had gone with Evans at all until a neighbor informed her that she'd seen Alvin get into Evans' truck. The following is another quotation from her. I told him that the children were seen on the back of his truck that night, and he told me he don't give a damn what nobody says. Apparently, he wasn't involved, claiming that he had actually dropped the boys back off on Clinton Avenue when they were done helping him move. Evans cooperated with the police in 1978 and even passed a polygraph test, removing him from their radar. There were essentially no other leads, and none of the boys had been seen since the day they disappeared. Days turned into weeks, weeks turned into months, and months turned into years. The boys' families clung to hope, their anguish growing with each passing day. The missing persons flyers adorned telephone poles and shop windows, the smiling faces of the 5 teenagers a stark reminder of the void left in their absence. But as time marched on, the case grew cold, the trail of clues leading nowhere. Rumors and theories swirled throughout the community like leaves in an autumn wind. Some whispered of foul play, others of tragic accident. But without evidence, without bodies, without answers, the case remained an open wound in the city's psyche. For 30 years, the mystery endured, a cold case gathering dust in police archives. But in the shadows, guilt and secrets festered, waiting for the right moment to surface. That moment came in 2008, when a man named Philander Hampton found himself in police custody on an unrelated charge. After a grueling 13-hour interrogation, Hampton's resolve cracked like thin ice under pressure. Hampton confessed to a crime so heinous, it sent shockwaves throughout the community. He and his cousin, Lee Evans, the very same contractor who had picked up the boys that night, had orchestrated a diabolical plan born of vengeance. According to Hampton's chilling confession, Evans had been furious with the boys for allegedly stealing marijuana from his home. What should have been a petty grievance escalated into a nightmare of unimaginable proportions. Hampton claimed that Evans had him hold 2 of the boys at gunpoint while he rounded up the others. The teenagers, confused and terrified, were then herded into a 3rd-floor bedroom closet of a house located at 256 Camden Street. He then proceeded to nail the door shut with the boys still inside. What happened next was a scene straight from the darkest corners of human depravity. Evans, Hampton alleged, doused the house with 5 gallons of gasoline and set it ablaze. The boys, trapped and helpless, perished in the inferno, their young lives snuffed out in an act of unfathomable cruelty. The confession sent investigators into a frenzy. They descended upon the site Hampton had indicated, armed with sonar equipment and a desperate hope of finding closure for the families who had waited so long for answers. But the earth held its secrets tightly. No human remains were found, leaving authorities with a confession, but no physical evidence. In March of 2010, over 3 decades after the disappearance, Lee Evans and Philander Hampton were arrested and charged with felony murder and arson. Hampton, perhaps burdened by the weight of his conscience, pleaded guilty in August 2011. He was sentenced to 10 years in prison, a punishment that many felt was far too lenient for the magnitude of the crime. Evans, on the other hand, chose to represent himself in a bold and risky move. His trial in November 2011 became a spectacle, with Evans vehemently proclaiming his innocence. In a stunning turn of events, he was acquitted, leaving the community in shock and the families of the victims grappling with a new wave of grief and frustration. The acquittal of Evans officially closed the 33-year-old cold case, but cruelly, it left the families with even more questions than they'd had previously. How could Hampton's detailed confession lead to an acquittal? What really happened to their 5 children? The truth, it seemed, remained as elusive as ever. In the years that followed, the case continued to cast a long shadow over Newark. Lawsuits were filed, accusations were hurled, and theories continued to circulate. Evans, maintaining his innocence, even filed a lawsuit against the Essex County Prosecutor's Office, the Newark Police Department, and then Mayor Cory Booker in 2008, claiming malicious prosecution. Today, the mystery of the Clinton Avenue 5 remains unsolved in the eyes of many. The remains of Melvin Pittman, Ernest Taylor, Alvin Turner, Randy Johnson, and Michael McDowell still have never been found to this day. Their families are left only with memories and unanswered questions. Their grief a testament to the enduring impact of that summer day in 1978. The case of the Clinton Avenue 5 is a tragic story of justice delayed and perhaps denied, and of a community changed forever by an unspeakable act. The Dahlsjö Case. On a rainy Thursday morning, July 29th of 1965, the city of Gothenburg, Sweden was bustling with its usual maritime activities. The port city, a vital gateway for Swedish industry, was no stranger to the comings and goings of ships, goods, and people. Yet, on this particular day, a series of events would unfold that would plunge the city into one of its most enduring mysteries, the Dahlsjö Case. Guy Carlson, 22, Jan Olaf Dahlsjö, 21, and Kjell Åke Johansson, 16, were three friends who had found work in the shipyards and industries of Gothenburg. Despite their occasional brushes with the law for minor crimes, they were known to be loyal and trustworthy. On the morning of July 29th, they disappeared, having been seen for the final time driving a midnight blue Volvo PV444, a car that belonged to Jan Olaf Dahlsjö's brother. None of them had a driver's license, adding an element of recklessness to their journey. The weather that day was particularly bad, with heavy rain making the roads slick and visibility poor. The trio had mentioned plans to go camping in the village of Usa, south of Gothenburg, but the inclement weather made such a trip unlikely. Despite this, they did not inform anyone of their departure, leaving behind uncollected salaries and, in Kjell Åke's case, a newborn child. Their families grew increasingly worried. Each of the boys was reported missing at different times, and it took months for the police to confirm that they had disappeared simultaneously. The midnight blue Volvo PV444 seemed to have vanished into thin air. One strange piece of evidence in regards to the case is a testimony coming from the sister of Guy Carlson following the disappearance. Apparently, she had gone to search for her missing brother at his apartment, and after knocking on the door, a complete stranger answered. This person was a young man dressed in a knitted sweater that she had actually made herself for her brother. He seemed to be stressed and informed her that she should try to look for him in the pub district. Little other information about this exchange is available. On the very same day as the other three disappearances, another young man vanished under equally mysterious circumstances. Hubner Lundqvist, an 18-year-old art student from Stockholm, had been spending the summer with his family in Torkov in southern Sweden. That day, the 29th of July, he decided to travel to Lysekil, north of Gothenburg, where a collective of artists resided. It's unclear exactly how he arrived there, but it's likely that he either hitchhiked or took a train. Lundqvist sent a postcard to his parents from Gothenburg, reassuring them that, quote, "all is well, don't worry." This would be the last anyone heard from him. His disappearance, coinciding with that of Carlson, Dahlsjö, and Johansson, added another layer of complexity to the case. As if the disappearances alone weren't perplexing enough, especially given the added mystery of Lundqvist, Gothenburg was also struck by a dramatic bank robbery, again on the very same day. This robbery would later be dubbed the Frogman Heist. Two men, one dressed as a woman, stormed the bank at Gamlestad Torget, firing submachine guns into the air. A courageous customer in the bank, who was an experienced wrestler, tackled one of the robbers, causing him to shoot himself in the leg. Despite this, the robbers managed to escape with 18,000 kroner. Adjusted for inflation, this equals around 21,000 US dollars today. The robbers fled to a nearby river, stripping off their clothes to reveal scuba gear underneath. They fired back at bank employees who tried to pursue them, forcing the employees to retreat. One of the robbers, hindered by his wounded leg, stayed hidden underwater for hours, while the other slipped away with the money. Eventually, both men and a third accomplice were apprehended by the police. All three were Hungarian citizens who had fled to Sweden after the unrest in Hungary during the 1950s. The Dahlsjö case has spawned numerous theories over the decades, each more intriguing than the last. Some speculate that the boys' disappearance was linked to the Frogman heist, suggesting that they might have been unwitting accomplices or witnesses who had to be silenced. Others believe that the boys were met with foul play unrelated to the robbery, perhaps falling victim to a tragic accident or some more sinister plot. The parents of Hubner Lundqvist held onto the hope that their son had left the country to work on the high seas. Reports of a young Swedish man matching his description surfaced in Singapore and Australia in the late 1960s, but these sightings were never confirmed. Despite extensive investigations, the mystery of the Dahlsjö case remains unsolved. The Midnight Blue Volvo PV444 has never been found, and no trace of the four young men has ever surfaced. The case is one of Sweden's only long-term mass disappearances. It's unclear if the disappearances of the three boys in the Volvo, the disappearance of Hubner, or the Frogman heist are connected, but it is very intriguing that all three of these cases happened on the exact same day. Despite extensive investigations, the mystery of the Dahlsjö case remains unsolved. The Lost Battalion of Gallipoli. The oldest story in today's video comes from the First World War, specifically from the Gallipoli campaign, taking place throughout the year 1915. The campaign took place on the Gallipoli Peninsula in Turkey, where the Allied powers of Britain, France, and Russia sought to weaken the Ottoman Empire, a member of the opposing Central Powers. They planned to spawn a new war front on the Turks, seizing control of the Ottoman Straits and allowing the Allies access to the Black Sea. This way, the British could reach their allies in Russia. The campaign would begin via a naval invasion of the peninsula from the Aegean Sea by British forces. Among the many units that fought in this ill-fated campaign, none would leave behind a legacy as mysterious as the 1/5 Battalion of the Norfolk Regiment, a unit of the British Army. On August 12, 1915, amidst the scorching heat and rugged terrain of the Gallipoli Peninsula, these brave men marched into the mists of history, never to be seen again. The story begins with a desperate push by Allied forces to break the stalemate that had gripped the peninsula for months. The 1/5 Battalion, comprised of 267 men, were ordered to advance towards Turkish positions at Küçük Anafarda. The battalion advanced into a forested area. Little did they know that this forest would become the stage for one of the war's most perplexing mysteries. As the day wore on, communication with the battalion became increasingly sporadic. The last confirmed sighting of the men was by a New Zealand soldier who reported seeing them disappear into a strange, low-flying cloud that settled over the forest. The 1/5th Battalion of the Norfolk Regiment seemed to vanish without a trace. In the days and weeks that followed, search parties combed the area, but no sign of the missing soldiers could be found. No bodies, no equipment, not even a single spent cartridge remained to tell the tale of their fate. It was as if the earth itself had swallowed them whole. The disappearance of the Lost Battalion quickly became the subject of intense speculation and numerous theories. Some believed that the men had been captured by Turkish forces and secretly executed. Others suggested that they had become disoriented in the heat of battle and wandered into enemy territory, never to return. However, it was the more fantastical explanations that captured the public imagination. The most famous of these accounts came from Frederick Reichardt, the New Zealand soldier who claimed to have witnessed the battalion's disappearance firsthand. According to Reichardt, he and his comrades watched in awe as the Norfolk Regiment marched into a strange, loaf-shaped cloud that had descended upon the battlefield. The cloud, he said, lingered for a time before rising into the sky and drifting away, apparently taking the entire battalion with it. As the years passed, the mystery of the Lost Battalion only deepened. Families of the missing men clung to hope, scanning prisoner of war lists and following up on every rumor and possible sighting. The British military conducted investigations, but with the chaos of war and the passage of time, concrete answers remained elusive. It wasn't until 1919 that the first tangible clue emerged. Reverend Pierre Point Edwards, tasked with locating the graves of British soldiers, made a grim discovery in the area where the battalion was last seen. He found the remains of several soldiers, all of whom had been shot in the head, execution style. This revelation lent credence to the theory that the men had been captured and killed by Turkish forces. However, the number of bodies found was far fewer than the 267 men of the Lost Battalion, at just 130. This still left the fate of around half of the men uncertain. Although we don't know exactly what happened to the remainder of the men, they were almost certainly either killed on the spot by Turkish forces or were captured. If the latter is the case, then it is possible that around half of these men did go on to live much longer than their comrades. However, unfortunately for their families and historians alike, we simply do not know. The Godard Family. Yves Godard was a 44-year-old general practitioner specializing in acupuncture, residing in Normandy, France. A dedicated doctor, Yves was well regarded by his patients. Together, Yves and his wife Marie France, 44, had 2 young children, Camille, 6, and Marius, 4. The family lived in Tilly-sur-Seulles, a small village in Normandy. Yves was described as a loving father, deeply affectionate towards his children. However, the family dynamics were complicated by marital issues and financial troubles. Marie France was reportedly involved in a tumultuous relationship with Yves, marked by accusations of infidelity. It's unclear upon what basis, but he seems to have believed that his wife was having an affair. On August 30th, 1999, Yves conducted his usual medical consultations, displaying no unusual behavior. The following day, seemingly out of the blue, he canceled all of his appointments, did paperwork, and took his children fishing at the ponds in Plankery, a short drive from their home. This was the last day he was seen in a relatively normal routine. On September 1st, Yves chartered a yacht named Nick from St. Malo, Brittany, and set sail with his children. Marie France did not accompany them. Yves told the yacht rental company that he planned to sail along the coast to Perros-Guirec and return on September 5th. He left cleaning supplies in his vehicle at the port, which would later hold significance. Nobody would ever return to claim the vehicle. On September 2nd, the yacht Nick was inspected by customs between Cape Erquy and Cape Frahel along the coast of France and on the way to Perros-Guirec. Meaning, by this point in the trip, he doesn't seem to have been deceiving the men at the rental company. The customs officers were apparently surprised to find one of the children asleep on the boat during their inspection, and were suspicious of Yves' behavior, with one of the agents reporting that they got a, quote, strange feeling from him. On September 5th, the yacht was seen near Brehec, and witnesses reported seeing Yves and his children buying waffles. The yacht was witnessed for the final time on the 5th, apparently abandoned near Point de Minard, Pluzek, not yet having reached their stated destination at Perros-Guirec. However, this sighting would be the final time anyone else was confirmed to have laid eyes upon the vessel. The yacht itself was never recovered or searched by authorities. That same day, a dinghy from the yacht was found drifting off the Breton coast, containing a jacket and checkbook belonging to Yves Godard. Several days later, investigators would search Yves' Volkswagen Kombi at St. Malo and would find blood and doses of morphine inside, again, along with the cleaning supplies. This unsettling discovery raised serious concerns and prompted a more urgent investigation, leading authorities to search the family home on the 8th of September. There, they found even more blood, including significant amounts in the bathroom, living room, and the parents' bedroom. 2 days later, a judicial murder investigation was officially opened, with Yves Godard the prime suspect, and was given an international arrest warrant. Adding to the grim situation, on September 16th, 1999, the blood found in the van was identified as belonging to Marie France Godard, who had not been seen since August 31st. On September 22nd, a life jacket from the yacht was found off the Channel Islands, and on the 27th, the yacht's deflated life raft was found on a beach in Lyme Bay, Dorset, with its canopy cut and inflation device removed. On January 16th, 2000, a fishing boat off the coast of Bats Island recovered a bag containing the Godard family's belongings, including clothing, checkbooks, and personal items. Then, on June 6th of 2000, a human skull fragment, later identified as belonging to Camille Godard, the family's 6-year-old daughter, was found in Saint-Brieuc Bay. On February 1st, 2001, Yves Godard's professional card was found on Chapelle Beach in the Abions archipelago. More than 5 years later, in October of 2006, a fishing boat in the area recovered human bones identified as Yves Godard's remains through DNA testing. One of the most plausible theories is that Yves Godard killed his wife, Marie France, and then took his children on the yacht, effectively committing a murder-suicide. The blood evidence at their home and the abandoned pickup truck suggests that Marie France was likely murdered before Eve and the children set sail. The discovery of Camille's skull and Eve's bones supports the theory that they perished at sea, possibly due to a deliberate sinking of the yacht. Eve was reportedly facing financial difficulties and marital discord, including suspicions of Marie France's infidelity. These pressures may have driven him to a desperate act. Even more strangely, it was later found that Eve had opened a bank account in Portugal, which had not been touched since his disappearance. This definitely adds a layer of complexity, but does not change the overall suspicion of financial stress contributing to the tragedy. Early theories suggested that Eve might have staged the disappearance to start a new life. However, the discovery of his and Camille's remains pretty much ruled out that theory. There were plenty of reported sightings of Eve and the children in various locations around the world. However, none were ever substantiated and are generally considered to be false leads. Despite extensive investigations, including international efforts and various leads, the true circumstances of the Godard family disappearance remain shrouded in mystery. The case officially closed in 2012 when Marius and Marie France were both declared legally dead. However, the exact details of the incident still remain unclear. And that, my friends, concludes the Mass Disappearances Iceberg. If you enjoyed this video, I highly recommend that you check out parts 1 and 2. All 3 are listed in their own playlist on the channel. If you all have any other ideas for future icebergs, be sure to drop them in the comments, as I'm now on the hunt to start work on my next one. As always, thank you so much for watching and for sticking by me for so long. I really appreciate it, and I will see you guys in the next one.